All right, well, welcome to this special webinar today. My name is Brian Cochran. I'm a financial planner and shareholder here at John Moore & Associates. We'll be hosting the webinar today. Very excited to be here in our office with Glenda Durano from College Advising and Planning Services based here in Albuquerque, one of our wonderful professionals that we lean on here when it comes to expertise in her area of college planning. This is part of a three-part webinar series that we are excited to be bringing to you, where we're bringing together three different experts, and this is a big part of what we do as financial planners here at John Moore & Associates. We always are leaning on other advisors, drawing from their expertise, aligning them with our clients, and it's based largely on this biblical principle of seeking advice. This has become a really strong verse for me. It may seem a little self-serving as a financial advisor, but really it reflects our desire to seek advice and counsel. Plans fail for lack of counsel, but with many advisors they succeed, and that's what this webinar series is all about. Today we're here with Glenda talking about college planning. On the 19th we'll be sitting with Dr. Linda Phelps from French Funerals and Cremation, also representing the Grief Resource Center, which is a brand new institution here in Albuquerque. Very excited for their launch. She'll be talking about resources available for managing grief and what's available in times of grief and what that process really looks like. And then we'll be wrapping up with a presentation with Susan Stewart, the owner and founder of Decisions in Care. She'll be taking us through important decisions, how to make good decisions around healthcare, whether it's for your spouse, a parent. We all deal with that at different phases of life, and she is a great expert and resource in that area, and we can't wait to hear what she has to say. So all three of these presentations will be available on our website after the live sessions as recordings that you can just pull, share, get the link, send it to friends and family around the country. And we're just really excited to be bringing this to you. If you want to pull the website, it is johnmoore.com/media, or you can just go to johnmoore.com, look for that media tab on the top right of the page, and you can definitely access these at any time. We'll keep those live for about the next 12 months or so. But today, is probably the most fun topic of these three to talk about, and I'm going to be turning over to Glenda here to talk about college planning. First, a quick intro of John Moore & Associates for those of you who are viewing this and are not current clients and not familiar with our firm. We are an independent registered investment advisor based here in Albuquerque. We've been around for nearly 20 years. Our 20th anniversary is coming up in March of 2017. Wonderful institution to work with, and I feel very blessed to be a financial planner and part of this team. The office on the left that you see here on your screen is our Albuquerque office, where we've been housed for, again, the last 20 years. On the right, you can see our Scottsdale office. We have 9 members of our team split between these two locations, but we're very much one group serving our clients. Very fortunate to be in these wonderful marketplaces serving a great group of families that we've been fortunate enough to be aligned with. We provide comprehensive financial planning as well as investment management, and that comprehensive plan is how I met Glenda here in her area of college planning. I was sitting with a client who was a raving fan of Glenda's after receiving advice, helping her children, her sons, go through the process of education planning, and really saw the benefits in Glenda's wisdom, her expertise. And so I'm going to turn over to Glenda here to tell us a little bit about herself and about this great topic of college planning. It's become so complex and so difficult to manage. So Glenda, start off, tell us a little about yourself, kind of how you got into this field and your expertise, your designations, and how you serve people.
I am a certified educational planner, and I'm one of about 500 in the United States. And what that means is I help families with the entire college planning process, whether it's about helping a student choose a major, help them with standardized test prep, develop a list of colleges, make college affordable by targeting colleges properly, work with their essays, complete their applications, all sorts of things, because this is a pretty complex process. And what I want to do, though, a lot of times people approach college planning with a great deal of fear and dread, and instead of that, this should be a very, very exciting process the way I see it. I'm going to start by saying today that if you've tuned in today because you liked the title, University Utopia, and you think I'm going to disclose what is the perfect school, you're going to be a little disappointed, because one of the things I do as a college planner is I go visit about 30 to 40 schools a year, and what I've discovered is there is no perfect school. On the other hand, there are outstanding fits for students. There are 3,500 wonderful four-year universities in the United States, many more internationally, and what we want to do is we want to not look for great schools, but look for a great fit. And this goes back to probably the most common mistake that I find in college planning. That is that most people, when they're starting to plan colleges, they say, ooh, I've heard about this school, it's really good, or this school's supposed to be good, and they are absolutely right. But what's good for one person may not be good for another, because it's not about the school, it's about the fit. And what I find is the most common mistake is that people start by looking at schools instead of looking at the student. You know, God has created each of us individually. We each have a specific purpose, and that's why we want to get very up close and personal, if you will, with that student in order to determine a school that will really help that student develop the skills necessary for the calling that God has on his life. And so what I recommend that every student do, and this is one thing that I do with my students, you can also find other tools online, is that we need to determine, the student needs to become very self-aware. One of the best ways for the student to become self-aware is by doing assessments. And I do this in 3 areas, and I think this is really valuable. One is personality, and I usually go by the Myers-Briggs model. And what there's been a lot of different studies as far as this type of personality does really well with this type of job. And I think what that boils down to is, will a person find this a meaningful job? And I know we're talking about colleges now, but let's face it, one of the main reasons that people go to college is to kind of prepare themselves for a career ultimately. And so we want to find something where it gives some additional meaning to their life. They feel like they are doing what God has called them to do. Now, another place that we assess is the interest, because we know that students are always, if they are interested in something, they are going to enjoy it more. And that's very important, not only in fields of study, but also in careers. And then finally, a lot of times we'll find students who say, oh, I'm interested in X, but they really don't have those natural giftings for it. And so we will assess those aptitudes. I am never going to tell a student if they feel like God's leading them in a particular place. I'm never going to say, well, look, honey, this particular aptitude isn't very high. I'm going to say, okay, then, if that's where you feel God is leading you, you need to work on X, Y, and Z. And so that's what we're going to do. We really want to help students, as high school students, develop what I call a target. We are not trying to tell them what they're going to do for the next 40 years. We're not going to tell them they're going to be a park ranger. College is a time of exploration, developing skill sets, all those things. And really, ultimately, it is a transition into adulthood. But part of the transition into adulthood has to do with really helping that student become self-aware of what he needs to do.
So when do these assessments take place? Because obviously you're not doing this halfway through their senior year. So when's too early? When's kind of the ideal spot to actually sit down with this young person and say, let's figure out who you are and what makes you unique?
You know, as students grow older, they really do start to become more self-aware naturally, but I find that the best time for the assessments is right after the sophomore year. I've done them a little bit earlier, and I can do ask some questions and help students to start asking things when they're younger. But as far as the actual assessments, I find that they change too much during the junior and senior year if I begin them in the freshman year. So right after the sophomore year is a great time to do it. And of course, the reason we do this is because we want to find out if we feel like the student is, if we have a target, we want to figure out, well, what does the student need in order to reach that target? And that's what really we're going to do. We're going to spend for that beginning part of the junior year. We're going to find out if a student has a particular target area that he's interested in, what are the classes like, what's the networking like, even what are the opportunities like. That's very important. And especially, what is the culture of the school like? A lot of times people don't understand what I mean when I talk about the culture of the school, but what I'm talking about here is, for example, you can say, oh, I'm from New Mexico, and you might think, I know exactly, you know, about the type of environment that person lives in. But if you think about the differences between Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Los Alamos, Artesia, Roswell, all those different cultures. And so what we want to do is we want to find a culture, not just where that student will survive, but where that student will absolutely thrive. And so in order to do that, we just want to find out what the student needs. Now, one of the things that the students need, not just according to what they're going to study, but it has to do with the whole viewpoint of how the student is going to look at college planning. Like I said, when a student sometimes says, okay, so I think I'm going to be a doctor or a lawyer, and so I'm going to go to school for this, a lot of times that starts to cause a lot of anxiety. And we're not about anxiety. We are about peace and resting in the Lord and knowing that He is the one who orders our steps. So I think it's really important to look at college sort of like Home Depot. And that is that as we go to Home Depot, we are gathering tools to do a job. And that's exactly what we're doing when we go to college. Really interesting statistic, and that is that they say that the average high school student now, by the time he reaches age 55, he will probably have had 11 different jobs at least. Now, sometimes those jobs could be in one career field. It might be popping from one career field to another. We don't know. But the interesting thing about those jobs is they say that half of those do not exist right now. And those aren't just IT jobs. Those, as our society evolves, different, we get different needs and everything like that. So when we go to college to get the correct tools, we're talking about things like communication skills, research skills, problem-solving skills, interpersonal communication, all those sort of things, plus in that area of concentration. And eventually these tools, as we get these tools, they'll improve our quality of life overall. Plus, it will also, I will say, they will improve the income. A lot of times parents will say, well, college is really expensive, quite an investment. And I'll say, yes, it is an investment, but the statistic that has shown up as far as what the average high school student makes versus what the average college graduate makes is about $21,000 per year. If you think that a lot of people are working 40, 50 years, that could be $1 million or so over time. So we want to look at schools when we look at universities so that we don't get stressed, sort of like Home Depot. Now, another way that we want to look at schools is we don't want to look at it with fear and frenzy, like I'm just this little weak thing and I'm going out into the big wide world and it's going to, get me. We want to look at college planning the way that God sees us. And, God sees our future. He knows every one of our days. And so we want to look at it as a time of excitement as far as what God has for us. But we don't only want to look at college as God's way and as tool gathering place, but also we kind of want to look as far as our studies go, both macro and micro. Does it have what we want? Need for the particular department? For example, if you're going to be a biology major, we know not all biology departments are created equal, but we also want to look at the schools as far as what they're like overall. And so after we've sort of done these assessments, we start to develop college criteria. We think, okay, what do I need? This is beyond the fields of study. And one thing we might ask, for example, is how large of a school do you want? And a student may say, oh, I like football, so I want a big school that has a football team. And we may say, okay, so let's say I find an incredible school. It's got everything except a football team. Would you like for me not to suggest that school? And usually they'll say, oh, no, please suggest it. What they're really looking for is school spirit. If they say, I want a big school, I'm going to always ask them a little bit, try to dig a little bit deeper. And a student can do this for himself to say, okay, so you want a big school. So does that mean that you can see yourself learning easily in a classroom of 300 students? Or would you prefer discussion-based lectures? Or would you prefer being anonymous, or do you want to be a big fish in a small pond? We ask why they want particular sizes. We ask why they want to be a certain distance from home. Do they want to come home every weekend? How important is appearance to them? Do they want that typical green space, urban, rural? All these things are important, and they all require introspection, saying, okay, here's what I think I want to do, and here's how I think I can get there. So there's lots of questions about how to develop this successful transition to adulthood and finding a really good fit for college.
When you're going through this set of questions and you're looking at criteria, do you find that the parents maybe step in at this stage and start to say what they want for the child versus what the child sees for themselves?
That is huge. That happens a lot, and that's because parents have a vested interest in their children, and they should. But what I separate it out is the student is my client. He is my first interest, and the parent is my customer. Now, I listen to what the parent says, but I always have to giggle a little bit and take the parent's hand and correct them when they say, okay, so we're going to apply to this school, and we're going to apply to, and it's always the great we. And I have to tell them, you know, you've probably already had your opportunity, so let's let the student have his opportunity. At the same time, I recognize the fact that parents know their students better than anybody else. And I've had parents say, he really does need sunshine. He really does a lot better in sunshine. That's absolutely valid. So we take it all into account, and that's how we develop the college criteria. Now, I will tell you that one very important piece of college criteria, especially as far as the parent goes, but also definitely for the student, has to do with the criteria of college cost, because none of us have endless pockets, and we all want to be reasonable about what we spend. And a lot of times when I show this cost of the average cost of colleges, and again, this is an average taken from a lot of different schools and everything, a lot of times people go, well, I just don't know if my student's actually going to be going to college or not. Because this is expensive. It is an investment, but it does pay off. You can see public in-state averages. In-state's always going to be your least expensive, but what you always want to ask is this the best fit, and will it facilitate what the student needs? That's so important. So in-state's always going to be least expensive. Out-of-state, that would be if I was a student from New Mexico wanted to go to Colorado or Michigan or something, average tuition. Those are all tuitions up top. $23,000 average tuition at private, $32,000. Then of course you have a range of room, board, book fees, miscellaneous costs. But there's several things to remember as you look at these costs before you just get fear of the price tag. It's very, very important to realize that you don't just consider the annual cost of how much you're going to be paying, but the cost of a degree is huge. Now, why I say that is because there are a lot of inexpensive schools where the average 4-year graduation rate, 13%, 14%, 20%. Actually, nationwide, the average 4-year graduation rate at a public school is 26%. At a private school, it's twice that, at 52%. So you can see if your student is going to be going to an inexpensive school and he's going to be paying going to school for 2 or 3 or 4 more years, that ultimately you might not be making the best decision to go to the cheapest school, because also a student's not getting out there and earning income or anything like that. So we really do want to look at that 4-year graduation rate. Price tags, really, they are meaningless when they come to colleges, and I'll have a lot of parents who say, my goodness, this school, the full cost of attendance, and full cost of attendance does mean room, board, books, fees, all that sort of thing. They'll say, it's $50,000. There is no way I can afford $50,000. No, nobody can. So price tags are absolutely meaningless. And here's the really good news. At the average private university, the tuition discount, that is that the 90% of students actually get a tuition discount, okay? And the amount of tuition discount varies from school to school, but it will be at least half, but 90% of the students get that. At a public university, the average tuition is discounted by about 14%, and that's about the number of students that get it. So it really depends on where you're going as far as what the tuition discount is. With the average, with a cost of colleges costing approximately $68,000 these days, this is the good news, all right? I will tell you a couple of things too. When you're thinking about price tags of colleges, it's very much a supply and demand thing. A lot of kids want to go to the East Coast and the West Coast. Your colleges are going to be more expensive. A lot of students want those really prestigious schools. Those colleges are going to be more expensive. A lot of students want the ideal number the student body to be between 3,000 and 15,000. Those schools are going to be more expensive. So I would encourage you to really look around, because you can find schools that are affordable. Now, how we make them affordable has to do with scholarships and what I call tuition discounts, or financial aid, you could call it. And there are two types. One is called merit-based aid, and the other is called need-based aid. The merit-based aid is what I'm going to talk about first, because that's where a student can really come in and really get some skin in the game and make the price of college affordable. The most important thing that colleges are looking at as far as merit-based aid goes is the student's GPA over the 4 years of college and the rigor of his classes. In other words, has he sort of skated through high school? He's made all A's. He's never taken an AP. He's never taken a dual credit, nothing like that. He's just skated through, made all A's. Or has he tried 3, 4, 5 APs, maybe taken a dual credit, done 5 or 6 honors courses? Really, they say that the rigor of the course determines how much that student wants to challenge himself, and that's what schools are looking for. How much is going to challenge himself? And it has to do with things like, has the student really demonstrated depth of interest? Has he demonstrated his full potential? For example, I have a lot of students who maybe go on a mission trip, and they'll go 1 week in Ecuador or Argentina or wherever they go, Dominican Republic, and they come back and they say that their life has totally changed, and they tell me, I want to write my essay about it. So I'll start asking them questions, and I'll say, that is so neat that your heart was touched, and that you really felt for those people, and you built a church while you were there. So how did you develop that potential, that interest when you got back? Did you volunteer for Habitat for Humanity? No. Did you adopt a child through Compassion International? No. Did you do this? Did you do that? And so colleges are really looking for depth. They're not just looking for flash in the pan things that shows that you had an extra couple of $1,000s to do it. They want to see what you care about. They want to see what you are. And a lot of times students will say, I'll do that when I get in college. I'm going to really change when I get in college, and I'm going to really go for it then. But the best way that colleges have of telling you, of determining what kind of student you're going to be in college, is what kind of student you were in high school. So I recommend every student really goes for it. Now, it's not about building a resume. It's about demonstrating your potential, demonstrating your interest in college. That's a very, very important thing to do, okay?
So when you look at, you mentioned the academic side about seeking dual credit and AP courses and challenging yourself with academics. When you look at, so you have an opportunity in an AP class, is it better to get a B in an AP class or an A in a regular class?
Every college admissions officer will tell you it's better to get an A in an AP course. They want you to challenge yourself. They want you to take those AP courses and those honors courses, but they don't want you to drown, okay? They don't want you to totally sink. Start with one your sophomore year, and take another 2 or 3 your junior year. Really build that up, all right? That is very important. They really don't look favorably upon students who are just taking all standard classes. Now, something else I will say, though, is, for example, let's say one student's high school offers 15 AP courses, and another student's high school only offers 3. So is the student who's in that high school that offers 15 AP courses, is he going to get in and the other student not? No, because it's all looked at in context. If you have taken advantage of what you have, if you are from an itty-bitty town and you don't have chances to do lots of internships, what did you do? That's the thing. Did you take advantage of the opportunities? Because that's what college is all about. It's about the opportunities that we have. What are we going to do? Now, that's merit-based aid. That's what the student can really participate in. That's how he can show that he is going to be a student that any college is going to want. The second type of aid that we have is called need-based aid. And this is where there's a lot of confusion. I could talk for such a long time about this, but I'm just going to kind of give you the basics. The government has determined that every parent is liable for, if a student wants to do higher education, that every parent, depending on his situation, should have something called an expected family contribution. In other words, parents, this is part of, we believe as the government that you are liable for this. But not every parent is eligible, liable for the same amount. It depends on where you live, what your income is, how many students you have in your family, how old are you from retirement. And this is called an EFC calculation. That stands for Expected Family Contribution. And so what you do is, I recommend that you start to find this very, very early. Honestly, when a student is in junior high, you can go online, you can go to something called an EFC calculator. There's a number of them online, and you put in information about your student's income and assets and the parent income and assets. And out will pop this number based on a very strange algorithm, but out will pop a number that will say, okay, this is what the government says. Theoretically, you are responsible for paying. But here's the thing, I have a lot of people who say, I make way too much money. There is no way that I'm going to get any need-based aid. The truth is that really only about 7% of students nationwide, those families are so wealthy that they cannot get need-based aid anywhere. Here's the secret. Need-based aid eligibility varies from school to school. If your EFC is, let's say, $20,000, and you apply to schools that cost $20,000, which will be difficult to find, but you can find them, you are not going to be eligible for any need-based aid. On the other hand, your EFC is still $20,000, and your student is looking at a school that costs $55,000, $60,000. You are eligible for the difference between the cost of attendance, the $20,000, or your EFC, $20,000, and whatever that school costs. You are eligible for need-based aid for that amount. They will usually take off merit-based aid first and everything, and a school can meet that need-based aid. You are not entitled to it. They do not have to do it. It depends how much they want you. It depends how much potential you've shown, but that's what the EFC is all about, the need-based aid, the FAFSA form that you found out. But I highly, highly recommend that you start doing it early, because these days, why you want to start doing this early is because there are legal ways to reallocate assets. There are legal ways to change income, various things like that. But these days, if you're a student applying in 2017, you're using your 2015 tax forms. And if the financial situation changes suddenly, it will raise a red flag. You want to do everything completely legally, because it is a felony, actually, to lie on the FAFSA. And besides, now they are using something called a data retrieval system, so they will electronically pull up your tax forms, and they will verify all these things are the truth. So very, very important that you start early planning, thinking about these things, so that you can be wise about it. That's what we're supposed to do. We're supposed to be wise about the way we plan.
Absolutely. We're big proponents for that. We talk about that with the families we serve all the time, as being proactive, making decisions ahead of time, not being reactive and saying, okay, we just decided that our son or daughter is going to be going to this school. Now let's figure out how to pay for it. Thinking more 2-3 years ahead of time, minimum, it sounds like in this case, about how you might manage your finances leading up to this six-figure decision about where they're going to go to school.
It's a huge decision, and you want to find out, you want to kind of get an estimate early on so that you know what to expect, because shock, it does not work well in this whole thing. We want to plan ahead, okay? Let me talk just a hair about loans, because a lot of times need-based aid will be offered in terms of loans. I'm not nuts about loans, but sometimes that is the only way that we can do it, because the price of college is just outrageous. About 63% of students do graduate with an average of $26,000 in loans. Sometimes that's the only way, like I said, that they can do that. But there is something that sometimes I will tell my students that they can do regarding loans, and the families, is sometimes the family may be able to afford it without a loan, but they're a little bit concerned that the student may not really going to be applying himself. So they may say, you know what, I want you to take out a student loan. Every student who applies to college is eligible for it unless they've had really significant difficulties. And they'll say, take out the loan. If your GPA stays above a 3.5, whatever it is, then that loan is mine, because I'm teaching you responsibility. But if your GPA drops below the 3.0 or the 3.5, you have just gotten yourself a college loan. And so sometimes people will do that in order to have a student put a little bit of skin in the game.
Yep.
Let's go on and talk a little bit about the secrets of college affordability, because there are secrets. Let's say two colleges give you $60,000 to come. Well, that would be a tremendous amount, and you'd be doing the happy dance for sure. But then you start examining the financial aid offer, and you find out that one of them, when they offer all of this money to you, 50% of it is in loan, and 50% of it is in grant. And then you have another school that says, no, we're going to give you 90% of this in grant and maybe 10% of it in work study. When the way that colleges package their financial aid to you is very, very important. And you can actually go online and look and find and see, how does this college on the average package its student financial aid. And if you are eligible for a lot more need-based aid than merit-based aid, or vice versa, you need to target the schools and really look at that. You also want to look at things as far as college affordability goes. Do the colleges tend to offer a lot of what I call hook scholarships? That is, they offer really big freshman scholarships, but not too much in those later years. Really want to check on that and see, how do they offer those different, all the money that they're going to do. And so once you kind of research those things, we want to target the student schools based on criteria, not only on financial criteria, because some schools give more need-based aid, some schools give more merit-based aid, but also those sizes of classes, those locations, the climate, all those sort of things we want to look at. Now, once we target our schools on the school list where the student wants to apply, I do have to tell you this thing as far as planning financially for a student, and a lot of people don't like when I say this, but I would say these days you should plan on a minimum of $30,000 out of pocket costs at any school. Now,
that's per year.
That's per year. So that's a lot of money. But that's what you should plan on. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you will pay that, but that's what I recommend now. And the other thing is, in 5 years, I'll probably recommend $35,000. I mean, at least, because college costs are going up so much. And let me go back just a little bit as far as targeting schools. Let's say your EFC is $20,000 and your student maybe will get a little bit of merit-based aid. Legally, a college cannot offer you more need-based aid than what your EFC is. They cannot cut into that EFC for need-based aid, but they can give you merit-based aid way into that. So if you end up having a really high EFC, your student could still end up paying very little actually for college, but it depends on the student, it depends on the school. That's so important to know, that this is all about the individual student and the individual school. That's ultimately how you find what I call a university utopia, the perfect school, the perfect fit for you. It takes a lot of self-awareness, a lot of asking questions, a lot of seeking answers, really finding out what your purpose is. But I think even more important than asking questions and seeking answers is that we really seek God, because He's the one who has every single answer. If you do this college planning process right, this can become a time of tremendous spiritual growth, a time of growing in faith, a time of the parents and the children growing together, praying that God would just be clear in what He wants for that student. And what I've determined over my years of experience is that When a student is saying, oh my goodness, where should I go to school? What that student is really asking is, oh my goodness, can I trust God with my future? And unequivocally, the answer to that question is absolutely yes. But don't just seek answers to your questions. Go in and seek God. As you ask those questions to Him, you will deepen your relationship with Him. And that's really what it's all about. Your Heavenly Father knows exactly what you need for college, and as you seek Him, He will lead you to find your university utopia. It's not about finding a great school. It's about finding that fit where God wants you.
Yeah. That's wonderful. Thank you, Gwen. I love your approach because, first off, it's intentional. Someone's really taking a solid process here of, like you said, identifying the characteristics of that student, what makes them unique, going through and discovering the financial aspects of it, going through the list and narrowing it down. And I don't know how else, working with an expert like yourself, where you would get that body of knowledge to know, how do I get from 3,500 incredible schools down to,
that's right.
Maybe, how many do you shoot for? Are you getting it down to 3 to 5 that you present to the family?
I will present about 15.
15.
And then
Wow.
the student has to do his own research, and I show him a methodology to narrow it down to 3 to 5 schools. And ideally, what I would love is once a student has visited those schools, met with the admissions officer, applies, hopefully gets accepted to all of them, every single school that he applies to, he would love to go to. He is nuts about every single school. Now, granted, there'll be a range of sort of foundation schools. These are the schools I know I can get in, I know I can afford. Target schools, these are the schools I would really like to get in, and I think they're going to offer me enough financial aid. And then the reach schools to say, you know what, I think I've got what it takes. I think we could afford it. I think I'm eligible for some great merit-based need-based aid at this school, so I think we could afford it. So we want to have a range, but ideally then we have the student apply to anywhere between 7 and 10 schools. Yeah.
That's great. So you're intentional, you're being proactive, but mostly I think what I love about this, that it's the way we conduct ourselves here, is it's a very personal interaction. It's not the same for everybody. It's not the same answer. Even if they want the same degree, really the university for them could be on the other side of the country.
Completely. This is very, very individual. Right. So,
I love that. So we have Glenda's information up on the screen here for you, phone, email, and great resources on our website if you want to learn more about her services and what Glenda provides. Again, we found her to be a great resource for the clients that we serve, and we encourage you to start this process if you're in that age and stage of thinking about education, which from today's conversation might start earlier than you might have expected, and start looking at this and praying about it and thinking about what's best for your student, for your family. It's really a great process. So Glenda, thank you so much for being here today, and we look forward to future interactions and wish you the best.